Greetings and welcome to Converging Streams, Interfaith Fellowship in our modern world. Our program is a production of the Muncie Interfaith Fellowship and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Muncie. This week's program is entitled How to Serve Now, Response to the Tsunami Disaster. Greetings and good morning. I'm Tony Piazza, the producer for Converging Streams, and ordinarily I only get behind the microphone to introduce each show, introduce the topic, introduce Dr. Wolf or the Reverend Perchlick, who normally host each week's program. But this week, doing something a little bit different. I've been very moved by this tsunami disaster, and so we have put together a program this week to talk about ways that you in the community can give back, help, and give service to provide some response to this disaster that's occurred. On December 26th, there was a very large earthquake and tsunami which affected much of the Indian Ocean basin, particularly in Sri Lanka, also in India, and throughout the Indian Ocean. A very large disaster on December 26th, with the death toll approaching 150,000. The extent of the tsunami disaster goes far beyond just the people affected in the Indian Ocean. Many of the people who have been missing or even killed by the disaster were vacationing. The areas affected are vacation hotspots, travel hotspots, and over 4,000 American citizens reported missing as of just a few days ago, according to the State Department. So many people have been affected by the tsunami disaster, and not just those native to the area. It was only just about a month ago that I did something a little out of the norm in regard to Converging Streams. As I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, I normally don't do a whole lot in terms of the voice on the show. I stay kind of off the microphone. I introduce each show, and you hear my voice at the close. But most of what I do in this program is I do the production, and I arrange the show and arrange the materials that Dr. Wolf and the Reverend Perchlick bring in. And normally that's about the extent of it. But last month, I went and did something a little bit different. I went to Anderson, Indiana to do an interview with a man named James Warner. And if you've heard that show, you'll be aware of what I'm discussing. Jim Warner, a man who runs a gospel music program based out of Anderson on a couple of local radio stations in Anderson. And he's been doing this for nearly 30 years. In fact, this is the 30th year of the broadcast. He's celebrating 30 years in March. And I went to discuss with Brother James Warner how his program is a service.
And I understand serving God, you can serve Him through serving your fellow man. And I believe that. I'm a strong believer in trying to serve God and treating my brother and sister the way that I want to be treated.
Of course, the larger context of that was how Brother Warner viewed his service to the community and his service to God by being out in the community, being active through such events as his radio broadcasts, but beyond that, he also does many other things in the community. His broadcasts are held each week at the Geter Center, which is a community building in Anderson, open to the public, and therefore his shows are open to the public. Anybody can come in, say hello, make a dedication or request, and send out prayer and whatever else that they would like to do on Sunday mornings. And this is one way that James Warner gets involved in the community. He also does a lot of things such as a Thanksgiving Day broadcast and a special Christmas broadcast on Thanksgiving Day broadcast. He has a kitchen dinner set up at the Geter Center, which is also open to the public. People come in and help, and those who really need Thanksgiving dinner and don't have the means of getting it any other way, they go to the Geter Center, and that is one way that James Warner has helped out in his view of service. And it was in that one particular instance when he was speaking of service to his fellow man, I drew some inspiration from that. And after this tsunami disaster took place, I realized this was one way to give back through service. Of course, the question is, how does one serve in response to this tsunami? What are the means one can serve? And there are no easy answers to these questions, but there are many ways, many avenues to explore, and certainly a lot of options available to respond to the tsunami. And to do that, of course, one must have the proper context for what has happened with the tsunami disaster. Therefore, we now offer Sounds from the Tsunami, a small collection of various sounds from people who have been directly affected by this disaster.
In this season when we gather with loved ones and count our many blessings, we hold the victims of this terrible tragedy in our hearts and prayers.
The figures may be approaching 150,000 dead.
We're talking about potentially millions of lives at risk due to a diarrhea disease, due to contaminated water, due to malaria through exposure to mosquitoes, and to dengue fever.
I've been very appalled and touched by the news out of Sri Lanka and Thailand and Indonesia, and I thought maybe I can do something and do it now.
Tsunami appeal.
We seem now to have as our biggest challenge constraints of getting it out to the people.
Potable drinking water, water that you can trust that won't infect you. That right now is the major issue.
And let us be mindful that even in this modern age, our world still requires compassion, tolerance, and generosity from each of us.
So the question immediately becomes, what can I do? What can anyone do to respond to this? And perhaps the most immediate answer comes in the financial arena, and really it is probably the most effective thing one can do, given the fact that the disaster is half a world away. So what can you do in the financial arena? Well, there are several ways one can donate. The American Red Cross is one organization that accepts donations. And from their website, here's some information on how to make a donation. Contributions to the American Red Cross International Response Fund enable the organization to help those affected by this crisis. The American Red Cross does not have the capacity to accept or collect and does not actively solicit individual or collections of in-kind donations in time of disaster. Monetary donations allow the American Red Cross to purchase relief items in the region, eliminating the added cost of shipment and transport from the U.S. In addition, cash ensures the acquisition of currently appropriate goods and helps to stimulate local economies. Ways to donate: you can call via the phone, 1-800-HELP-NOW. There's also a number for Spanish speakers, 1-800-257-7575. Online, donate securely at www.redcross.org. One can mail contributions to the local American Red Cross chapter or to the national address, American Red Cross International Response Fund, P.O. Box 37243, Washington, D.C., 20013. Beyond the national effort by the American Red Cross, there are things one can do locally. Dr. Nihal Pereira, a professor of urban planning at Ball State University, has organized a response fund. And from an email sent by Dr. Pereira, as you know, the tsunami in the Indian Ocean has caused unprecedented devastation in almost every country across the Indian Ocean. The current death toll is over 150,000. Beyond Indonesia, where the quake happened, the tiny island nation of Sri Lanka, population 19 million, is the worst hit, and it lost 30,000 people instantly. Yet they are fighting back, and they've already opened the road connecting the worst hit city in the south, Gale, and the capital, Colombo. With the Office of International Education, Dr. Nihal Pereira has arranged an opportunity for anyone who wishes to take part in the cleaning and reconstruction effort to do so through the Lions Club, which is a familiar international organization. People of Sri Lanka and foreign volunteers are working very hard, and sending money is one of the best ways to help them. If you wish to make a contribution, please send your check to Kelly Matthews at International Education, Ball State University. Please write it to the Lions Club of Sri Lanka. Kelly will collect all the checks and mail them to Sri Lanka. And you can send those checks to Kelly Matthews, International Education, Ball State University, Student Center 115, that's Muncie, Indiana, 47306. And per the Lions Club contract in Sri Lanka, you should draw the checks in favor of Lions Club International, District 306C. This information from Dr. Nihal Pereira at Ball State University in the Department of Urban Planning. Dr. Pereira, incidentally, also is going to be taking a student trip to the South Asia region, primarily in India. Fortunately for the students involved in this excursion, the tsunami has not altered their plans. However, the students may make a trip to areas affected later on in the semester. It is a semester-long experience for the students taking part in that. As you can tell from the excerpts from the American Red Cross and from Dr. Nihal Pereira, the way that we can help on a local effort is through providing what funds we can provide to help the larger organizational efforts that are out on the ground doing what needs to be done. Now, if you feel you may have some specific skill, some ability that goes beyond money, there are avenues and ways to do that. The obvious answer would be to contact the American Red Cross or other international relief organizations such as UNICEF and volunteer your services on the basis of what you can do. But for the average citizen, the average person listening to Converging Streams this morning, the obvious, most instant way to provide assistance is through money. And again, we've listed ways you can do that. The American Red Cross, through their website, www.redcross.org, or you can mail a contribution to the American Red Cross International Response Fund, P.O. Box 37243, Washington, D.C., 20013, or through the efforts organized locally by Dr. Nihal Pereira, mail checks to Kelly Matthews, International Education, Ball State University, Student Center 115, Muncie, Indiana, 47306, and draw your checks to Lions Club International District 306C. Those are ways you can help providing money here locally. Look for other efforts to happen in the future as well. The Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, the host organization of the Muncie Interfaith Fellowship, which provides co-production of this very program along with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Muncie. The Center for Peace and Conflict Studies is making plans to provide some form of response to this tragedy, including the student group at the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, Peace Workers, which will be providing some response in the coming months. Be sure to check out the website of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies at bsu.edu/CPCS for information on that, and we'll provide updates as we can on Converging Streams. We will close today's broadcast with a moment of silence, an observation and remembrance of those who lost their lives and those who lost family members on the December 26th tsunami disaster. For Converging Streams, I'm Tony Piazza.
In this season when we gather with loved ones and count our many blessings, we hold the victims of this terrible tragedy in our hearts and prayers.
The figures may be approaching 150,000 dead.
We're talking about potentially millions of lives at risk due to a diarrhea disease, due to contaminated water, due to malaria through exposure to mosquitoes, and to dengue fever.
I've been very appalled and touched by the news out of Sri Lanka and Thailand and Indonesia, and I thought maybe I can do something and do it now.
Tsunami appeal.
We seem now to have as our biggest challenge constraints of getting it out to the people.
Potable drinking water, water that you can trust that won't infect you. That right now is the major issue.
And let us be mindful that even in this modern age, our world still requires compassion, tolerance, and generosity from each of us.
Thank you for listening to Converging Streams, Interfaith Fellowship in Our Modern World. Our program is a production of the Muncie Interfaith Fellowship, with content and financial support from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Muncie and technical support from radio stations WCRD and Work FM. Most importantly, we thank you, our listeners and followers, for your support. To connect with Converging Streams, including listening to our entire catalog of past programs, getting our latest new content, and making your own contribution to this program, visit our website, convergingstreams.org. Converging Streams is produced by Tony Piazza, George Wolf, and Thomas Perchlik. Thank you for listening and have a pleasant week.